Daniil Dubov, whose king was under attack in this game, launches a counter attack against Anish Giri and wins this match against all odds. And now this is the Queen's Gambit being placed by Daniel, and this is the traditional variation of the Queen's Gambit. And now after the bishop move, the Queen's Gambit uh, basically the pawn is now taken and the e4 is now played and b5 is played now protecting this pawn, so you cannot take this back uh, with your bishop as usually in the queen's gambit. And after the pawn move to a4 attacking this weak backward pawn, the pawn is pushed to c6, trying to protect that pawn. So in case you take the pawn back pawn, the pawn will be taken back and replaced, and the knight comes to c3 again attacking that weak backward pawn. And instead of pushing the a pawn to a6, the pawn is now pushed to b4 attacking the knight, so the knight retrieves and bishop comes to a6 protecting the pawn over there. And e5 is played by Daniel, who's playing with the white pieces, and h6 is played now attacking the bishop. So the bishop takes the knight, and now you have to take back with your pawn because of the pawn presence here. And pawn takes the pawn, and the pawn push to c5 is played attacking the central pawn. And knight to d2 is now played, and the pawn is now pushed to c3 by Anish. And after the pawn is taken, the pawn takes the pawn back, and the knight is now attacked, and the knight jumps to e4 attacking the pawn and also defending this pawn at the same time. And the pawn takes the pawn, the pawn takes the d4 pawn, and the bishop goes to b5 with a check. And the bishop takes the bishop, and the pawn takes the bishop back, and the queen comes to d5 attacking this undefended knight over here. So the queen immediately takes the pawn, and he also takes the other undefended pawn as well. And the queen's presence here prevents Daniel from castling at the moment. So the knight takes the other pass pawn as well, and immediately the bishop comes to b4, pinning the knight against the king. So Daniel played this move. Basically, I haven't seen any such game. Like basically, there are no pawns in front of the king, and there is not much defense. The entire queen side is exposed, and Anish basically could launch an all-out attack against the king, and still he had to castle on the queen side, and with the king exposed here. So after the castling, the queen goes to f5, attacking this knight twice. So the knight had to move. So the knight moves to b5, which creates a checkmate threat. So the queen cannot take the knight here. If the queen cannot takes the knight, it will be checkmate, because the queen can just go here and deliver the checkmate even without this pawn as well. Because so this move, you cannot take the knight here. So the knight jumps to a6. Now you can take the knight, and now queen goes to d7 with a check, and also protecting the knight over here. And the king moves to f8, and Daniel basically moves his king to b1, trying to put it somewhat safer. I wouldn't say safe. And after that, the rook goes to d3, attacking the bishop over there, because the knight also attacked the bishop. So something had to do. So the check happens first. The queen comes to b4, and the king moves to c2 now. And after the check a4, the king again moves to d2, and after the bishop check, the king moves to e2. So basically, all these series of check allowed the king from to move from the queen side towards the center of the board. And the king of Anish also, he's uncastled at the moment. Both the players have a very weak and exposed king, and the knight jumps to e5, protecting both the queen and the rook on the board. And a check ensues, and with the queen, and the king moves up, and Dallas king is now relatively safer than in the previous position. And now the rook comes to f8, because otherwise there's a checkmate threat by taking this pawn over here. So rook had to go there, protecting this piece. And Daniel basically doubles his rook and create a battery with the rook, both the rooks and with the queen. And his knights are uh, on, on the other side of the board on an attacking position. And now h5 is played by Anish, trying to activate his rook and for attack and defense. And now the queen is brought back by Daniel to d4 with the intent of bringing his queen to the king side, attacking the king. And rook goes to h7, trying to defend the king, and the queen comes to f4. And after that, the bishop goes to c5. Now the queen can go here and create a check. It won't be mate, but it'll be good enough attack. And knight jumps to d4, blocking that attack. So it covers the attack of the line of attack of the bishop, and also attacks the queen at the same time. So the queen had to move, and the queen moved to a2. And after that, the rook goes to d2, attacking the queen, and the queen again goes to d5 with a check, and the king moves to e2, which is a very safe square for the king. And now the bishop goes to b4, attacking the rook over here. And but I'll basically ignore that attack with the knight to c6 move here, basically. So if you take the rook now, the knight will jump over here with a check, and your queen will be gone as well. So the queen moved to c5 now, and nevertheless the check happened, because you cannot just take, because of the queen here, you cannot take it with your queen, because your queen will be gone with the pawn here. And so basically the queen cannot take the pawn now. After the king moved to h8, basically Anish resigned the game, because there's a forced checkmate on the board. So the forced checkmate will happen like this: the knight will take the f7 pawn, and the rook takes the knight back. And you cannot take with this rook, because uh, the other rooks can just jump down, and it will be a checkmate immediately. I guess you can bring it, but still it will be a checkmate with the help of the pawn over here. So the other rook had to take, and this brings the queen to h6 with a check. And after the rook covers the check, the other rook is also taken now. And this is a checkmate, because this knight move prevented this all the protection that the queen and the bishop was giving to this f8 square over here, which resulted in a checkmate. So that's the match. So as you saw, most of the time Daniel's king was under attack, which was very exposed, and but in spite of it, he was able to protect the king, and also launched a good counter attack, resulting in his victory. So we have to remember that sometimes in our games we will be under attack, so you don't have to give up yet. You can still go for a counter play, and hope to win the match, basically. So thanks very much for watching. We'll be back with more such good videos.